It's everywhere. It's confusing. There's just one announcement after another one, what Malik calls the announcement velocity platform, where we just seem to go, it's more important how fast you can do a news release than what you actually do with it. And other CEOs seem to think it's some sort of either panacea or it's a way to sidestep acknowledging making bad decisions. What is it? Why AI? This is Gary. This is another episode of Gary on Manufacturing. Give an acknowledgement to my longtime sponsor, Inductive Automation. Today's podcast is sponsored by Inductive Automation, makers of Ignition, the world's most versatile industrial automation platform for connecting data, systems, and people. With the new Ignition 8.3 release, you can easily manage time series and event data, quickly create custom graphics with onboard drawing tools, and centralize control using Ignition's new gateway interface with global search and deep link launching. Providing additional support for Git, containers, and private data protection to go along with its unlimited licensing, Ignition 8.3 takes industrial operations to the next level. And if you go to their website, they are just constantly adding new features to 8.3, quite a bit coming on. It's a very powerful platform, and you can go to inductiveautomation.com, just as it sounds, inductiveautomation.com. And my thanks to this longtime sponsor of my work. So I'm thinking about AI, and there's a lot going on, and by the time I outlined things to talk about here with this podcast and got around to actually setting up my my switch gear and my switchers and everything to actually record, actually more has happened. But one of the things is we call AI. In fact, in my latest article that I wrote for the Italian magazine that I write for 8 times a year, I talked about how AI is kind of an English word now. It's not really 2 letters for an acronym or letterism or whatever you want to call it, but it's actually almost a word. But it developed from a long time ago when they talked about artificial intelligence. A writer I admire, Malik, to whom I referred to a little bit earlier, refers to it as augmented intelligence, which is a little bit more descriptive or accurately descriptive of what's going on. We're augmenting intelligence. It's not really artificial intelligence yet, if ever, and who knows what is going on. So what I've seen going on so far with AI and especially in industrial automation. So Microsoft has a product called Copilot. They've had it for a while. All the major automation vendors have embedded engineers out in Seattle or Redmond to work directly with Microsoft in what Microsoft is doing. And they're so closely bound and integrating Microsoft technologies into their own products that you get copilots everywhere. So most of what copilots are doing are helping program. So if you're an automation supplier and of course you're supplying programming software with your controllers and so on, so they have copilots. So far, we haven't had the industrial automation people doing what Microsoft is. Microsoft decided that, well, this is AI and we need to load it into everything, and they wound up with what is known as slop. And I don't think I've seen any so far in our particular niche of the world. But beware, because they could start adding Copilot to everything, and the next thing you know, you just got crap all over the place. But mostly what I see is in our area, what companies are doing are training. So these are large language models. That's another confusing thing because AI is really old. It goes back to neural networks and machine learning from 30 years ago. I don't know, longer than that. Quite a while that I've known about it. So anyway, so then they came up with these large language models, which is basically a text-based thing, which they like OpenAI and then Anthropic and other people and Gemini and so on, they have just trained a database with everything that they can scrape legally and illegally and morally and immorally out of the what's on the internet, and then made a large language model that you can query and it'll come back with words, and the math behind it is way over my head, but essentially what it does is it predicts. So everything is turned into a mathematical, like a number, like hex or something, and it searches, and then it does a probability analysis of if this word, what's the usual next word, and it does a probability analysis and so on, and it does it so quickly that you don't realize that it's doing all the work and the math behind it, and therefore it gives you text back. So they're saying, well, we're going to have like it's going to be its own thinking thing. Well, but that's not what the technology is. The technology is text-based, and they've tried some video-based, and that's not worked all that well recently. In fact, I think who was it? OpenAI just dropped their video-based thing, and it cost them $1 billion partnership with Disney because Disney was going to make some money out of the whole deal too, and it's just not working that well. So we have a text-based thing, and a text-based thing isn't necessarily all that broadly based. Let's put it that way. So what we're doing is adding. So Copilot is really good if you train it on your own data, and you train it just to do certain specific things, like help you in programming your automation, or maybe training it on your own data. You can get better predictive maintenance or predictive kind of things out of the database of your own experiences from your own SQL or whatever database you've got, or data lake or whatever it might be, and trained. And so you can do your own thing, and that's pretty good. Let's look a little bit deeper into this. Then we have coding off of it, and that has been somewhat successful. CEOs of big companies think, oh, well, this will be nirvana, and we'll just go to a programmer in Claude Code, and I can eliminate whole bunches of jobs and get it done faster. Well, maybe in theory that would work, but in reality, when you go to Claude Code and it spits out a bunch of code, it's getting it from a large language model, and it may or may not be applicable to the job that you're actually trying to do. And it may or may not include stuff that got thrown into the training that isn't exactly correct. And therefore, once it spits out the code, then somebody has to go back and check it and make sure it's really the right thing and does what we want it to do, and doesn't have slop in there or a wrong function call or something that it picked up in its training, and so on. And I'll give you examples. So I was in an interview discussion, and throughout the term smart manufacturing, which led to a very brief flurry of what's smart manufacturing, I thought, oh, that'll make a good essay. So I went to Claude, which is my chat thing of choice, and said, Claude, what's smart manufacturing? And I want to know your sources. So it goes out and it comes back and it says, well, according to this, and this is what smart manufacturing is. And I said, oh, that sounds like system of systems. And tell me what your sources are. It says, oh yeah, systems of systems, blah, 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 and this is this, and it fits into smart manufacturing like so. And here's the sources. And I said, that's really starting to sound like a philosophical architecture that dates from the 1980s called holons, Holons, holons. A holon is a whole thing that encompasses other whole things. For example, water is a whole thing. Water is a thing. It's a whole thing, but it's made up of hydrogen and hydrogen is a whole thing, and oxygen is a whole thing. So, so you could build up what's called a holarchy, and so on. And I thought, wow, smart manufacturing sounds on a philosophical level like a holarchy, an architecture based on holons, on whole things, and then that breaks into systems of systems, and then that breaks into some of the details and specifics of smart manufacturing, which is basically using digital means to augment our intelligence about how to use digital technologies and do things better. Maybe we can do predictive, maybe we can do what-if analysis or root cause analysis and the 5 whys and the other things of Lean, for example. And so, maybe that works as a tool. So what it is people are discovering that AI, as we know it, with a large language model can be a tool, but you really have to learn how to use it, and you really have to learn where the faults are, and you really have to double check it. So back to my example of the smart manufacturing. So I said, oh, this sounds really cool, but I've got an awful lot of data here. So Claude, tell me, write this in an essay in the style of themanufacturingconnection.com. And it said, oh, yes, you are very clear. They're always complimentary. Be suspicious whenever people are overly complimentary. But it comes back, yeah, I see how you write, and here's an essay. And it gave me an HTML document that had boxes, and it had call-outs, and I thought, okay, this is really good, but now it's going to be a lot of work on my part to go back and go through that, double check what it said, make sure it's in my style, make sure it didn't throw in anything weird. And I haven't gotten around to doing that part of the work yet. That's I'd rather be on the creative end of figuring it out than I would be on the editor end of trying to rewrite something. But that's a tool, and it's good because it organized all that thinking that we had done, the research that it did, and so on. And so worked out pretty well, and pretty soon I'll be publishing an essay on smart manufacturing at the Manufacturing Connection. A little bit longer than I usually do. I usually do shorter news pieces with commentary, but I'd like to do a little bit more of this thinking a little more broadly and specifically about some of these things. Let's take another couple of looks on things. I keep following Cal Newport. If you don't follow Cal Newport, he's got his deep thinking podcast, and he's a computer scientist at Georgetown, a full professor, and he's with the Center of Computer Science and Ethics now, and looking more broadly at society impacts of technology. But he's been looking at AI. In fact, he even started a Thursday podcast just kind of debunking some of the hype around AI. And a couple of things. So he wrote a book some time ago called A World Without Email, and what he looked at was we get these nice little automation things. Now, in manufacturing, we've done automation with machines and had been really successful. It takes some of the really backbreaking and really bad work for humans and the rote work and repetitive things and things in dangerous areas and so on, and made it better for people to work alongside machines in manufacturing. But for knowledge work, every time we added something, it just seemed to make more busy work. We had email, so now we can communicate. Cool. But what happened? Now we have the explosion of email, and even me working independently just gets way, way too much email, and I have to sort through and figure out what's good, what's bad, and junk stuff. And I'm starting to get emails from PR people that are actually written by AI. I can tell because first thing is that it's very complimentary. Oh, I see you write about this very clearly. Oh, geez, okay, give me a break. And then it'll say, oh, because you write about this, you'll be interested in this. And I'll go, no, I'm not interested in that. So anyway, yeah, AI for PR. Every PR person listening to this, forget that. But anyway, yeah, so you just get more, so you got more email, you get more stuff. So they have Slack for you have synchronous and asynchronous communications. Well, every time you get one of these, like a Slack, now you're on Slack all the time, and you have to watch it all the time. And every time you click on it to look at it, you're taken away from doing deep work that requires thinking, and you're always being distracted by email and by Slack and by messages and by other things, and you can't find the time to just sit and think deeply and write through if you've got to do a business plan or a new product. Like I used to do product development, and you'd have to think for quite a while about customer and technology and putting it all together and that sort of stuff. And that takes time and it takes thinking. But if all the time I'm just speeding up because of all these cool new digital technologies, well, AI just adds another level where you can do things faster and faster, and now you're still in a gerbil wheel of doing stuff but you're not doing the real work of thinking and thinking things through, and what's the possibilities, and what's the next product we can do, and how we can make it better, or how we can, maybe I've done my 5 whys and I'm trying to get to a root cause, and I need to sit and think about it, but I'm too busy with all this automation and stuff. And one other thing that Cal Newport just cited was an essay by a researcher, a very early researcher called Yan LeCun, YAN LECUN, Yan LeCun. And he's basically saying we're just about ready to tap out on the top of large language models, because it's text-based, everything is text-based, and it's digital database stuff, and you can only take the model so far, and then that's it. And he thinks we're about to, asymptotically reach this level of what these things can do. And he's thinking, among other things, it's not going to work for like putting a robot in your house, because there's too much analog in there, and there are too many other models. And what you really need to do is, Cal didn't use this, but all of a sudden I thought about it. I just talked of systems, and what you really need is like a system of systems. You need the LLM, you need the large language model for doing certain things and programming, but you need an analog component. You need models for maybe analog. You need models for maybe visual and other things, and you need to put together a lot of different modules, and that's not what these things do that we're talking about right now. So we're in this vicious cycle of everybody trying to one up everybody else as far as CEOs and all the AI companies, when actually we're moved along pretty good, and we just need to figure out how to use those. And then there's another level before we can actually even start to talk about this artificial general intelligence, or whatever the heck the CEO du jour wants to label it. So before it gets to us in manufacturing and industrial applications and in process, there's a lot more to do. And so a couple of things. One, don't worry about it taking your job, but do learn how to use the tools. It is a tool. You can learn to use it, and it will help you, but you have to learn how to best let it help you without creating just too much busy work, or too much redundancy, or too much having to go back and figure out what the heck it did and make sure it did it right, and that's really hard work. So a lot of stuff to go on. Let me check my notes here and see what else we can. So I started out, I said, why AI? And the classic answer, so there's a classic, when I was a philosophy student, there was a meme that went around before we had memes, and it said there was this philosophy professor came in for the final exam and wrote on the board, why, ? And walked out. And one kid thought for 30 seconds or something and scribbled something on a piece of paper and left. Right away, and everybody else is just writing like crazy. Back in the age of having to handwrite your answers out on blue books, which is now the new age of having to write things out in blue books. Anyway, somebody said, well, what did you do? He said, well, that's the winning answer. He said, why not? And a lot of stuff in Silicon Valley happens because of why not? Well, we can do it, so why not do it? Basically, it's there's an amoral thing, not immoral. They're not necessarily evil, but they don't care about morals. They care about making money, and so it's amoral. I don't care what it does. We can do it because we can do it, and let's just put it out there. And if we're lucky, we can make $1 billion, and that's kind of where that is. So AI, why AI? Mostly right now it's because we can do it. I think it will be a useful tool, and right now in many ways it is a useful tool. So just keep checking it out. Don't stay away from it, because you're going to need to know how to use it, but just know that it's not a panacea. It's not going to work for everything, but learn where you can use it, where it doesn't work, just like we did with when we first put PCs out on the factory floor in the 1980s. Where does it work? Where doesn't it? Does it work as a controller? No, like the late 90s, early 2000s. But it does have a lot of uses, and so on with a lot of the other technologies we've imported. So keep an eye on it, play with it, work with it, see where you can use it, stay up. Don't worry about all the crap that comes from CEOs. Mostly they have other agendas. So anyway, so a few thoughts on AI. Why AI? Why not? Maybe it'll help. Today's podcast is sponsored by Inductive Automation, makers of Ignition, the world's most versatile industrial automation platform for connecting data, systems, and people. With the new Ignition 8.3 release, you can easily manage time series and event data, quickly create custom graphics with onboard drawing tools, and centralize control using Ignition's new gateway interface with global search and deep link launching. Providing additional support for Git, containers, and private data protection to go along with its unlimited licensing. Ignition 8.3 takes industrial operations to the next level. You can download Ignition for free at inductiveautomation.com. And I encourage you to go to inductiveautomation.com and stay up with all the new additions that they release fairly constantly. So check it out. It's really a powerful industrial automation platform. Can't believe I would ever say things like Git and containers in an industrial software setting. It's really cool. I just love the way things have been expanding and adopting technology. Anyway, this is Gary Minchell. His website is themanufacturingconnection.com, and check that out and send comments if you have any. Always appreciated a conversation or two. And as you leave this podcast, just like to leave a word for just be kind. Not as Hanlon's razor has it, don't impute to malicious circumstances to that which can be computed too easily to stupidity. And so maybe you just need to be kind to people. Maybe they're not being malicious. Maybe they just are stupid. I don't know, whatever. But a little bit of kindness goes a long way. Thanks for listening, and talk to you later.